In Afghanistan, daily life for women and girls has changed monumentally in the last year as they face new restrictions under Taliban rule. Girls are no longer permitted to attend school past the 6th grade, despite the promise made by the Taliban leaders. And there are few exceptions. Women are no longer allowed to work and are expected to wear a burqa when outside the home. Many brave women have taken to the streets in protests only to be met with resistance and, in some cases, violence. So we want to bring in Azra Jafari. She is an Afghan politician and human rights activist, also the first female mayor in Afghanistan, and she's left the country last year since the Taliban took over. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Mayor, because I know that's what they used to call you as a sign of respect, though you are not a mister. But, you know, you worked very closely with the Afghan government, which would explain why you had to leave. You would have been a target. But can you give us a sense of just how far Afghan women had come prior to the troop withdrawal, and not just in Kabul, not just in the big cities, but in the villages where more conservative sentiments would have sort of held sway?
First, I would like to say thank you so much for having me to this program. Unfortunately, since last year, when Afghanistan is falling to hand of Taliban, we lose a lot of value and right and achievement that we fought for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And now Afghanistan is facing hunger. Every people is hungry. There is no job. There is no education. There is no economy. There is no system. Everything is collapsed. And unfortunately, the most effect of all these things, it is on women and children. The women in Afghanistan now, it is at least 1 year. They just every day by day, they push them to be behind the wall, like a prison. Now they cannot go to work. They cannot go to school. They don't have any humanitarian rights as a human. But before, women, they had right to go to school. They had the equal rights with men and women. We fight for that. And we had in Constitution, Afghanistan Constitution, women and men, they have equal right as a human. So and since last year, unfortunately, many women are struggling to stay at home. And then they fire from the works. They cannot go to work. The girls over 6th grade, they cannot go to school. And also, what was?
Well, let me ask you this, because you also were the sole female co-author of the Constitution in Afghanistan back in 2003. You and others had worked so hard for decades to bring a sense of equality to the country. And now, as you say, women, specifically young women, are left without access to education and employment. What then? I just hear consistently the sense of despair, this sense of frustration that the U.S. left in such a dramatic fashion. What do you advise the women that you're in contact with back in Afghanistan as far as what they can, do now that these protections of equality are gone?
I believe during these 20 years, women, they taste the freedom. They practice freedom of speech. They fight for their right. So all this achievement, it didn't come easy for them. They fight for them. They pay for them. So now you can see, as soon as the Taliban took the palace in Kabul, few number of women, but they are bravely go to in front of the palace, and they don't accept them, and then started demonstration in the street. Even they know the Taliban and their ideology, but they fight for them, and then until today, they never accepted. They stay home, and they day by day they struggle. They demonstrate against the Taliban. with any kind of weapon they have. But most of the time, the women, they go to the street, and the Taliban, they beat them, they arrest them, and many as women activists right now, it is in prison. But the family, they don't know where they are. For example, the last demonstration in Afghanistan, it was in August 15 for the anniversary of the fallen of Afghanistan. And that day, some of the activist women, even the woman who was walking in the street, they arrested by Taliban. The families, the family, they still looking for them, and the Taliban, they don't answer. Where are they?
The Taliban has said, they will eventually reopen schools for girls. It just takes time. They have to convince not just the people in the big cities, but the people in the villages, in the outskirts. Do you believe anything the Taliban says at this point?
I think the people who watching the Taliban during in 1990s until today, what word the Taliban they told, and they believe for that, or they act as a result. We all remember the United States and the international communities. They started peace process with the Taliban, and we know what was the article in this peace process. For example, one of the most important was Taliban. They promised to don't support the terrorists. But the last month, Azra Jafari, they killed by a U.S. strike in Kabul. So it means Taliban, they never commitment for what they say and what they promised. And the ideology of the Taliban, they never get changed. So I think this is very foolnishness, or it's like very childish if we accept that the Taliban will change. The only things the Taliban always, they're trying to convince the international communities and the US by the women rights card. This is a card for them to try to play with the international communities to get more advantage. But every time when they sit in Oslo, when they sit in Norway, but when they come back, they don't commitment, and they just started the way they think, and then now the country, it is just controlled by the article, not law, not constitution, not the system. It's nothing. So the Taliban is never get changed. And then they never, because they are not one group or one government that take, they take the rule and the regulation as a policy, according a policy. They are different groups, and every time one of the group, they think what is good for them, and when it is the time to get advantage, so they say one statement, and the other day they completely change, and they said opposite of what a statement was yesterday.
I think that's a really good point. I think that, the Taliban leaders of 20 years ago are not the same people that negotiated this withdrawal, the same people that are in charge of some of the villages. You're right. It's a very fragmented group. Azra Jafari, the first female mayor in Afghanistan, you are far from home, but we can see that you are still passionate and working for your people. Thank you very much for spending some time with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Azra.
Thank you so much for having me.